first thing talking about was the importing of artwork, but let's start off by saying, number one, your applique icon up on your toolbar is located right here, right next to your complex fill applique. Certainly in a very traditional manner, applique, and then without any kind of design up there, I'm just going to go ahead and grab my applique tool. Let's come down here and just grab a color. And basically you can take any shape or create any shape. You input it as a running stitch line, and you can turn any design into an applique, right-clicking to complete the function just that quick. With the command button on, you'll see in a slow redraw that it literally will put your tack down line down. Excuse me. Let's go back to the beginning. I seem to be having an issue here. Here we go. In a slow redraw, my tack down line, placement line, tack down line, top stitch. Any shape can be turned into an applique. Utilizing all left clicks, it is input as simply a running stitch line. We're going to get back to the settings and all that, but traditional appliques, but not with a satin stitching, basically input as a running stitch. Let's talk about the type of artwork that we can bring in and how we convert and how we digitize the different styles of artwork. And we're going to start with vector files, folks. When we open up a vector file and bring it up onto the screen, and I'll go ahead and bring this anchor up, certainly vector files, if you look over here on the sequence view, come in as artwork. If I open it up by clicking on the plus sign, you'll see that it's artwork. Well, as I click on each individual piece of artwork, or I guess to determine what the different aspects, certainly you've got colors here, but you also have two areas of black. One of the simplest ways to determine what area you want to digitize, you know what, come on in here, and by clicking on this little eyeball next to the plus sign, you can turn off the other colors within the design. So basically, and again, vector files, one of the things with vector files is vector files, when they're created, they're layered. That's why when I turn the blue back on, when I turn the yellow on, when I turn this last black on, basically in order to create this very fine black outline, what they did was they flooded the entire area with black. Now, the reason that I bring that up is because when one works, and this is throughout the entire process of digitizing within Floriani software, whenever you're working with vector files, you basically have two manners in which you can digitize. You can digitize in a very traditional manner, meaning that you can grab each stitch type and with manual input traditionally digitize. Or the second manner of which to create a design with a vector-based file is to convert it to the stitches. And again, that's why I turned off these colors, because again, because vector-based artwork is layered, black outline is a complete flood of color of black. We do not and will never give you the ability to use the magic wand with vector-based files. If I gave you the ability to use the magic wand, you clicked on, let's say, a satin stitch, and then clicked on this black outline that you see surrounding the entire design, it wouldn't just do that. It would actually flood this entire background color. It's simply based on the way that vector files are digitized. But now, converting is a dream come true, because all you really have to do at this point, and I'll go ahead and leave those other colors off, is I'm going to simply select the black. I just come right over here and do a left click and select it. At this point in time, I'm just going to right click, and you'll see that I have a convert to function. I go to convert to, and I simply click applique. And you know what? Boom, there's your applique design right there. It'll just take a second, and up it will come. My computer's just moving a little slow, and there's your applique design. Vector-based files are really cool, and they really do convert very, very well. Once again, now in a slow redraw, you'll see in the slow redraw that indeed we've got our placement line, once again our tack down line, then our top stitch line. We also have a stop that's placed in there after the placement line, so you can then place and then continue on with the tack down line. That is the importing of vector-based files. Now, for backdrop files, JPEGs, or bitmaps, your TIFFs and such. Also very simple. We'll come down here, and then certainly you can click on File and Load Backdrop. I use the shortcut key. It's located right under the ruler. And let's go ahead, and I've pulled up some letters. These are all bitmap images. So let's just click on that letter 3, bring it back up. Now, even again, because I have an entire structure totally filled with black, when you choose and utilize the magic wand now in your digitizing by choosing your applique icon, it's not going to fill this entire area. It's going to see just the outline. So once again, we'll click on our applique tool. We'll once again now come over here, and now we will select the magic wand. You'll also notice anytime you bring up a backdrop file in the sequence view, it does not come up as artwork. Vector-based digitizing, that's why it sees the vector-based files as artwork. It cannot see bitmaps, JPEGs, and such as artwork files, hence we don't have it in artwork in the sequence view. Come down here and simply select the color. We'll go ahead and select that red. I've grabbed the magic wand, come anywhere into that 3, and boom. And you know what? That baby is digitized just that quick. We literally have made Applique just at the touch of a button. But that's not all, folks. You know what? Because you can also utilize your Applique function with TrueType text. So let's come in here, and you know what? I'm going to go ahead and import TrueType text. Let's just make a letter 0. Excuse me. I want to make it a cap. And we're going to bring it up, and I'm going to choose a letter 0. Certainly I want to size it, so I'm going to go into transform. Let's make this about 3 inches tall. I am in metric. I'll just turn it over to 75. If indeed you wanted it in inches, come over to the margin area on the left or on the top, right click, and you can toggle the inches right there if you want to size in your inches. So I've gone ahead and I have turned that into, or I've imported my TrueType text. Let's go ahead and hit the window. Once again, simply select it, right click on it, and convert it to an applique. And it will do both inside and outside whole. Now, though, I want to be very specific, and this is really an amazing function. If I go into a slow redraw with my TrueType text, or I should say any design where you have a hole in the center. So I have my applique, which is going to fill in this area right here, and then, of course, I've got my center line, my outer line. But in a slow redraw, and as I go through it, you'll see, number 1, tack down line. Boom, jump over, tack down line. But now, placement line. I'm so sorry. Let's go back to the beginning. Placement line, placement line. Now it jumps back out, and it's going to go ahead and do my tack down line. But now you see what's going to happen when I finish the O and it jumps in. It's now doing my tack down line, but it's doing it to the outside of the placement line. Basically, it's because it's dictated as the software program was written that when you do that internal or external border, that tack down line goes to the interior. It's basically just shooting it to the inside. Well, the same thing happened here, but now we have a major issue because we're not tacking down the applique whatsoever, okay? So watch what we're going to do here. We're going to come in and we're going to select it. Once you select it, your properties box opens up here in the top right of your screen. Look, folks, this is when you click on Adjust Holes. What Adjust Holes does is we're basically telling the software that this is an internal hole in the applique. It moves the actual tack down line to the inside. So Adjust Holes and Apply. After it does its thing, we'll come back into a view and a slow redraw, and you'll see now that we get placement line, tack down line to the internal side, now tacking down that applique, boom, and here we go. That is the function of the Adjust Holes, and I really think that is quite amazing. So you have the ability, certain, to work with your vector-based files with either traditional digitizing or a convert to function. We work with our images simply by bringing in the image and utilizing our magic wand. We can work with true type text. And then the final method of working with appliques, and it's built right into the system, is we have provided you with an enormous amount of applique shapes. That icon is located here on the very far top right of your toolbar. Simply click on it. These are all pre-done shapes that you can do or that are already ready to become appliques for you. So you know what, and I use this in my classes a lot. Let's say we want to make that banana an applique. Just click on it and boom, up it comes, and there's your applique. But now, let's start to talk about our properties box over here and the controls that you have in your properties box. The first control that you'll have, you'll see right up here at the top, are your types. Now, you'll see that it says a satin. It's a very traditional satin stitch design. So once again, in a slow redraw, you're going to get your placement line, then it's going to stop. You're going to place your applique, your tack down line to the internal aspect or the internal area, then your top stitch. Now, traditional satin stitch applique, but watch. Let's go ahead and select that design again. Any applique that you do within Floriani software, you have choices, and the first choice after that satin stitch is your E, or a blanket stitch. So I can click on my E stitch, I can click apply, and now I have my blanket stitch. So you can turn it into a blanket stitch applique. You also have the ability to utilize our motifs. So by clicking on motifs, you can now choose to border any applique with any of the motifs located within the system. So let's say we choose this motif right here. Now let me explain something at this point. Pattern length in your properties box, and I'll cover this again. Pattern length controls the size of your symbol. So if I come in and I tell it to be 4, it's going to be 4 millimeters tall. Click apply, and I will now border that applique with a 4 millimeter tall symbol. So you have the ability to use traditional satin stitch applique. You can border with any one of the symbols, an E or blanket stitch, the symbols. But then get this, and this is my favorite part, are the symbols. Let me explain what symbols are. I'm going to change the background color of my screen. So again, traditional satin stitch, E or blanket stitch, motifs, and then the symbols. Now, located next to the type, and once we click on symbols, you have all of your symbols located here. Want to get a look at your symbols? If you come up here to this icon, these are your symbol icons. Just click on select. These are all the icons that are located in the symbol area within the software. Okay? Now, what would you use symbols for? Because, look, I can actually get crazy, and I can say, you know what, I want to border that banana. I'm going to change the size a little bit with bananas. Click apply, and they will size absolutely correctly, and so you can border with your bananas. So I think that really is quite amazing. You have the ability with any applique, digitized vector-based artwork, your backdrop files, your true type fonts, or when you're using the shape, you can always border with traditional satin stitch, E or blanket stitch, one of those magnificent motifs, or an incredible amount and a variety of symbols that you can border with. Kath, let's go ahead and open it up to some initial questions if there are regarding artwork or such. Then I'm going to go ahead and continue on with the settings within each function.
Okay, well, great. Well, first a comment. You need to stay close to your microphone because you're going in and out.
I'm so very, very sorry.
Okay.
Is that better?
Much better. Now, we have a twofold question. We want to know what is the difference between a vector file and your other artwork files, your bitmaps, your TIFFs, your JPEGs, and where do they come from?
I'm sorry.
And where do they come from?
Okay, vector-based files are files that are generated through graphic software, Adobe Illustrator and such. In importing the different file types, and many people make this, and I've covered it multiple times as we've gone through the software, But when you're importing artwork, you have several choices. A lot of people make the error of clicking import artwork when they want to or intend to bring in bitmaps, JPEGs, and such. Bitmaps and JPEGs are brought into load backdrop. I'll get to that in a minute. Import artwork is how you bring in your vector-based file. Let me get a new screen up here, Kathy. So
and we need to know the difference. What's the difference between a vector file and a pixelated artwork or a bitmap, a JPEG?
And that is exactly the difference. Pixelated files are made up, and as we zoom into one, and I will do so, pixelated files are made up through a series of little pixels, little squares. So as you zoom in, truly, they take on the appearance of little squares. Vector-based artworks, which is created through a graphic program, and I'll go ahead and bring up something. It doesn't really matter what I bring up. Even this little anchor design. I'll go ahead and bring up this anchor design. I'm going to change the background color back to white. I think everybody can see it a little better. Let's go ahead and do that. And when I zoom into it, the biggest difference is in the clarity of the artwork. You'll see now that instead of pixelated, where I get all these jagged type edges, I have a very, very, very smooth edging. So it basically is just the style of artwork. Now, what style of vector-based files do we support? Currently, if you come down here under File Types, we will support AI files. Those are Adobe Illustrator, EPS, EMF, WMF, DXF, and PLT, which are plotter files. The software will also work with some of the cutting systems which read plotter files and will import plotter files. It's quality of artwork. Most people truly prefer to work with vector-based files because the artwork is so clean. But we actually have kind of what I would simply call, I don't want to get technical, but I call it auto-smoothing. Even with a pixelated file that does not have extremely straight, beautiful lines, as our software converts it to, let's say, satin stitching, it smooths the line. It doesn't get real jagged. I'll show you now the difference between a pixelated file. And again, one of the issues, and why, and in many cases, I will take vector-based files, convert them over to a bitmap. Why? Because I like the usage of the magic wand. Once again, when you're working with vector-based files, you cannot use the magic wand. The reason being, once again, if I come in and turn off these other colors, you'll see that that entire area of black, because of the way vector files are built, they're layered. Okay, that allows me or disallows me the usage of the magic wand. It's going to flood that whole thing with color. So it's a little bit of give and take. Why you get absolutely gorgeous artwork, you don't get usage of the magic wand. Now, quite honestly, and I'll just add one little extra point here, if I'm going traditionally to digitize an entire design, where I'm not going to use the magic wand, I have to say that I do prefer vector-based files when I can get them because the lines are so clean. So in a traditional digitizing, or from a traditional digitizing standpoint, I think vector files are more desirable. Now, when we look at pixelated files, and I'll just bring something up. Let me jump back here and grab something else. Example of this basketball design. Let's just size it up a little bit. Pixelated files are just that. They're done with pixels, look like little squares. So as I zoom into this now with a real tight zoom, you'll see that it's simply a series of squares. You do not have really clean, straight lines. But once again, one of the nice things with the software is I grab my satin stitch, and I grab the magic wand, and I go ahead and apply a color, and I left click on that. You're not going to get a line that has all these jagged edges. You will get a little deviation based on, because it is looking at shape, but it's a smoothing type technique. Now, to change that, I would have to do is come in here. You know what? Let's change the color on that so you can see it a little better. Excuse me. But I can come in here. I can select that satin stitch. I can come into reshape. I can right-click, and I can say I just want to edit the outlines, and now actually changing outlines and smoothing is really just that simple. So because of what, again, I'll call an auto smoothing technique, and then its savvy ability to edit with normally very minimally generated points, bitmaps, and the challenge that they've incurred for people for so many years, in my opinion, is all but gone now with the Floriani software. Let's go ahead and move on to the next question, Kat.
Okay, Walt, and would you also explain when you're bringing in your JPEG files that it's a backdrop file?
Yes, I so apologize. Again, the import of vector-based files is done under File and Import Artwork, so File and Import Artwork. Bitmaps, JPEGs, and such are done through the Load Backdrop. So you can click on File and Load Backdrop, and up will come your JPEGs, bitmaps, TIFFs. You'll see there I've got a JPEG. This image is, here's another JPEG. I believe these are bitmap files. I got some bitmaps in here. So, but I've got another JPEG. I'm so sorry. But JPEGs, bitmaps, I've got all my JPEGs in this file form. Those are done in Load Backdrop. Now, under the ruler over here on the left toolbar is your Backdrop tool. It's a shortcut. It's just like clicking on File and Load Backdrop.
Great. Now, Walter, in your properties, when you did your banana with the bananas, you selected in the drop-down list, you selected the word banana. But what if you don't know what all those words mean? Is there a way to view the pictures of those symbols?
On the symbols, yes, I alluded to that already, but I'll be more than happy to show you. Directly left of the magic wand icon, you have a symbol icon. If you left-click on that down arrow and select and click on Select, you're now looking, and actually there's that banana right there. But these are all of the symbols that you can utilize when bordering.
Also in our properties box in our applique, when you drop down and go to symbol in your properties box where it says satin, if we go to symbol there and then we select the little 3 dots next to where it says anchor, over to the right, the 3 dots, you can also...
Well, God bless you. Look at you, Miss Kathy. Thank you very much. I hadn't even tried that. But yes, it's another very simple way to access the symbols without having to go in there. That's awesome. Thank you, Miss Kathy.
You're very welcome.
And as I've told you and I've said so many times, it never ceases to amaze me that every time I sit down with the software, and as much as I know, and I have studied this software backwards, forwards, you name it, I know it, but I keep finding little shortcuts that I just love. I'm a drop-down menu kind of guy, so I like drop-down menus. And
well,
so
you're a traditional digital.
I don't use a lot of the hotkeys and that, so you guys amaze me when you show me little shortcuts. I'll use that every day. And again, I use the banana on this, but in choosing a symbol, look, if I wanted to do this with anchors, I'm simply going to come in, I'll tend to change the size. Once it's selected, you can border it with any one of the symbols. You know what, this has some really nice ramifications in quilting and just creating outrageous borders for structure. I see applications for it in monogramming, all kinds of things. I think the usage of those symbols is really, really quite amazing.
Well, the other question I have is it possible with the applique to do 2 or 3 different shapes and colors within the same? So if I had a little boy, I could make his shirt one applique and his pants a second applique?
Absolutely, you can. It's always based on the coloration within a design. Anytime it sees a color, absolutely it is. Now, let me explain, and I don't know if I have a piece of artwork in here really to show you, Kathy, but let's say we're talking about a little boy and he's got on one color pants and he's got on another color shirt. Normally, one of those structures, let's say the shirt, is going to be in its entirety a continuous satin stitch border. When you're working in many cases where the pants, let's say the shirt goes over the pants, if we click on the pants with the magic wand, it's not going to necessarily do the top area, but that is so easily done in editing, in both stitch editing, and I'm going to show you a few little tricks like that, how you can add stitches and that. So with multicolored appliques, sometimes there is an element of a little bit of traditional digitizing or inserting stitches to tie down an area that may not be bordered with an applique. In the case of, like I was saying, pants, you could do the pants with an applique. It would do everything except have a continuous line that would show you both for placement and then for tack down. That would have to be added, but it's done very simply in stitch editing.
And you could actually use the applique tool to do that if you wanted to do traditional applique around.
You can pull off segments, Kath. Look, let me just try to pick up something here. Let's look to see if I have something in here. Okay, I'm just looking for something with two colors in here. Let's see what I got in here. No, this one isn't going to work. Well, you know what? It could be, if I come in here and pick the applique tool, first of all, let's make this baby a little bit bigger so I get some size on it. But if I come in here and pick my applique tool, pick the magic wand, come down here and apply any color, and clicked on here, okay? No, it put an applique around that entire thing. Now, the challenge is, when I come on top of it with the purple, it's going to do that same purple. Now I have layers on top of layers. So what I'm going to suggest that we do is we come in here, and as we undo this, we might have to come in and do a little bit of traditional digitizing by turning off the magic wand, coming in here and just outlining a certain area, letting it lay down as an applique because it'll put the tie down and such, okay? It didn't border it. But now what I'm going to have to do is come in here and edit. I'm going to have to simply edit in my placement line and then a tack down line because I certainly want this area of the blue, if I wanted this an applique, to go under this area of that purple applique. So in multicolor appliques where you have layering, there is an element of a little bit of traditional digitizing. But you can see as I just did this area here, okay, this, I've got my placement, I've got my tack down, I've got my top stitch. All I'm going to do in something like this, and I don't have the graphic up here right now, but I'm going to come in and I'm going to come into my stitch edit function. I'm going to find that stitch. I'm going to right click. I'm going to insert after, and I'm going to start putting stitches that are my tack down stitches that tie in, and then I'll come in and do a little bit of a zigzag or whatever lockdown stitch, and boom. I just added in the stitches that I need to add in. So in Stitch Edit, it makes it so easy to come in there and do those aspects of it. Yeah, it takes a little bit of time and effort, but you can do it. Folks, you can all do that. It's not hard to do. In the workbook, importing or inputting individual stitches, utilizing the grid as a guideline for proper stitch length, it's really quite simple to do. Really, really quite simple to do.
Walter, one more question. And this may sound simplistic, but some people do not understand what an applique is. What is an applique?
An applique is basically where we're going to use another piece of material. Well, you know what? Let's go ahead and show you an applique because one of the neat things you can do also, and I'm going to go ahead and select this banana. Under Commands, and I'm going to jump ahead, but under the Command function up here in the Properties box, okay, number one, you've got your Start and your End command. One of the nice things that you can do when you're doing appliques is you can start with a frame out. So it will actually, after the tack down, it'll frame out and bring the frame out towards you, allowing the applique to lay down much easier outside of the needle. It pulls it from under the needle placement. So you have Start and End commands. You also have your tie in and tie off. You know what, folks, I should also at this point let me stress, in my opinion, this area should probably be defaulted to a basic or a triangle determining or based upon what lockdown stitch that you want. But your tie-in and tie-offs are your lock stitches. The first 4 to 7 stitches in any embroidery design need to be done at a fairly short stitch length, forming, in this case, a little bit of a triangle, or a basic is a 4 or 5 stitch tack down of stitches at about 1 millimeter apart. After a needle is initially inserted into an embroidered or a piece of material we're embroidering on, it takes 4 to 7 revolutions of the hook down below to tie to the top thread. That's why many times, folks, you'll see a needle come down and it'll start walking and stitching, and yet it will not pick up the first 2 or 3 or 4 stitches. It's because it has not tied to the hook, to the bottom thread. So it takes, in my opinion, a series of 4 to 7 stitches at about 1 millimeter in length. The most important stitch in embroidery, the 2 most important stitches, are right here, folks, your tie-in and your tie-off. Every element of an embroidery design is started with a tie-in. Every element of an embroidery design ends with a tie-off. They are your lock stitches. Tying off stops unraveling from taking place. Now, though, what I want to show you down here in commands is that you have a choice of fabrics. Now, those fabrics are all numbered. By clicking again these 3 little dots, you'll see the fabrics. What an applique is the placement of another piece of material which will be integrated into the embroidery design. So, example, I could do a basketball. The first thing it's going to do is a running stitch of that basketball. The machine will stop. We can lay down a piece of material that actually looks like, my gosh, you could take a basketball, cut it up in pieces, and then use the actual skin from the basketball. Could be an applique. You lay that down. Normally the applique is cut to the shape of the tie-down line. Look, I'm going to show you a few little tricks how you can generate your own applique shape to cut it. I'll get back to that in a minute. Basically, appliques, though, are cut the shape of your placement line. So, the design will run a placement line. It'll stop. You'll physically lay down another piece of material. It will then do a tack-down stitch, which holds it in place, and then we do the top stitch, either satin, a blanket or E-stitch, symbol, or excuse me, motif, or one of the symbols. It's called multimedia. We're utilizing a different piece of fabric and with our embroidery design to create a heightened illusion. Anyway, when you look at the different fabric types, let's say I'm going to use denim in this design, or burlap. We have burlap. You can click on burlap, click open, and then click apply, and it will actually add that material type. Now, I get some questions asking, can we import our own fabrics? There is a methodology. Those of you who want to add your own fabrics, what I suggest that you do is go to software support. It's too many steps to take you through right now. Go to software support, submit the question, and Karen will get you that information emailed to you. It's not hard to do. There's just a series of steps that I don't really want to take the time to take you through right now. We've got a lot that we still want to cover. But you do have the ability under command to add any one of the applique materials that we have already preset into the software. And yes, indeed, you can now import your own fabrics. I hope that made that clear enough, Miss Kathy.
Yes, it sure did. So it's time to move on.
Okay,
so move on to the next step.
Look, what I want to talk about now are the settings in the properties box up here to the top right, because we do give you truly an uncanny level of control with your applique. Once again, up here on the top under your applique tab, type your stitch type. Satin stitch, E-stitch, motif stitch, symbol stitch. You then have applique width. This is the actual width of the satin stitch border. So if I come in and I change that to 5 millimeters and click apply, I now have a 5 millimeter wide satin stitch border, okay? Just a little hint, very seldom do I go much under 2.5 millimeters as my applique width. I like a fairly wide width of an applique. I actually prefer 4 millimeter stitches or such. Indeed, you can go narrower than that. It tends to amplify some of the challenges that can be incurred with, such as fraying and that when you're doing an applique. So the first function that you get here is your applique width. Now, I also believe if I change that into an E-stitch, that width will also control. Let's change that to 7. Let's go ahead and select it. I just was thinking about this, and I hadn't tried it before, so we're going to go ahead and just try it. That will also increase the width of your E or blanket stitch. So you do have a nice level of control with your E-stitch when you're talking about the width also. So first control is width. The next control level that you have is stitch type, okay, or excuse me, stitch length. This is the stitch length involved in the movement through the embroidery design. Travel stitches, basically. It has nothing to do with the digitizing of the design. Basically, to get from one area to another area within any given embroidery design, you do have control of the stitch length. Once again, folks, the rule to running stitches, which is what underlay are done with, is length equals loft. So I tend to use stitch length of at least 3 to 4 millimeters in my applique making, especially with a fairly wide applique border, because that increased length increases the width. If you have, and the variation for that, if you have some really stretchy material that you're doing applique stitching on, many times I'll go to a little bit shorter of a stitch length, because realize that elongated running stitches also pull on the fabric, and they can distort very loose, open-grained, very stretchy fabric. So while I prefer them to be normally longer, for every rule in embroidery, folks, there's an exception to that rule. So stitch length is the next control level. Certainly next is your applique density, and your density control is preset right now, and it powers up at a 0.4 density. By going higher in number, and I'll go higher in number again, 0.7, it lightens the density of the applique. And again, folks, density works like this. The higher the number, the lighter the density. The lower the number, the tighter the density. That's because density is spaced in tenths of millimeters within Floriani embroidery software. When I set a density of 0.7 and I go along a straight line of stitching, the distance between any two stitches is going to be that 7 millimeters. If I come in and change that to, again, that 0.4, the density or the distance between stitches is now 0.4 of a millimeter. The lower the number, the heavier the density. The higher the number, the lighter the density, okay? I believe this also controls the spacing within your E or blanket stitch. Quite honestly, I hadn't tried that, but no, it will not control that default only in a satin stitch. The next is the cornering when you're doing square corners, whether it's going to do a miter or where it's going to square the corner off. And you have actually square and extended corners. The placement line is next. Now, the placement line and the control of the placement line, the offset is over here to the right. 99.9. In fact, I have never seen a placement line where the placement offset is 0. Basically, when you set it to 0, that's exactly the shape of the applique. Your placement line is going to be where you lay down your applique. So you always want it to be in the exact position to size correctly to your applique. Again, I have never altered this feature. The default is 0. Keep your placement line set at 0. You'll see that if I change it 25, let's go ahead and change it. It changes the position of the placement line, and it's set basically right on top of where, because my offset on my tack down is also 25, it put it in the same position as the tack down line. The challenge with this would be is that my tack down, the line that now holds the applique down, is sitting right along the edge of the applique. Hence, it's going to meet areas where it's not going to catch the applique. Placement offset in your placement line, always set to the 0 function. Click apply. That's now the actual shape of your applique. Next is your tack down line. Now, you can make an applique with or without a tack down line. Very seldom, though, will you ever not do a tack down line. What would the differential be? Look, folks, there are occasionally, and there's several different types of applique. One is called a cutaway. What a cutaway is when you take an entire design, we'll just look at this banana design, and I'm going to put a piece of material down that's larger than the banana. You know what I'll do? I'll actually place that piece of material down. I will let my placement line run. So I'm actually placing the material down before I even do the placement line. The placement line runs. I stop the machine and I back it up. Okay? I let the placement line run again. I stop the machine, I back it up. I let the placement line run again. Now, very simply, you can also select that placement line, cut and paste. What you basically want to do is a series to 6 to 8 running stitches in the placement line that actually locks the applique down into position. Once that's done, before you do the top stitch, the satin stitch, so what I'm saying is that this would be done a multiple of 6 or 7 times. I run it, back it up, run it, back it up, or I select that, copy and paste. I let 6 to 8 of the running stitches run, physically let the machine stop now. You now pull the applique up to that given line and with a pair of scissors, cut it out. That's called a cutaway. Basically, we don't even have to have a pre-done applique shape made. We can simply lay a piece of material right on top of any other given piece of material, let that running line run 5, 6, 7 times, stop the machine, pull the material back, cut it, then let the top stitch run. That is indeed called a cutaway. The other form of applique certainly is when we're cutting the applique design to the exact shape of the applique. That is also what the placement line is utilized for. What I do is I will actually, now you know what, let me show you something. When you're looking at a design entirely within, when you digitize it and your commands are on, you'll see the stop, but in a slow redraw, what you're going to see is you're going to see that it's basically a one-color design, okay? When you save the design as a stitch file, all right, I'll go ahead and let this get done. But when I say File and Save As, and I save this design, we'll call it Banana, and I'm going to save it as a DST file extension, which is a stitch file, okay? Now I'm going to go ahead and save that. It already exists. Let it go ahead and override it. Now we'll start a new one, File and Open. And I grab my Banana DST and you bring it in. You'll see now that in a slow redraw, what I have are 3 different colors. So the first color that I have is my placement line. Second color that I have is my tack down line. That's because it's a place to stop there, hence it changed colors. After the placement line goes, once again it's going to stop, it's going to change color, and you now have your satin stitch border that comes down. So you know what we do is I will actually separate the design. I will actually pull out these 2 colors, the second and the third color, and I will run my placement line. But what I'll do with that placement line is that once it's grabbed and once it's a stitch file, I'll lay very, very short stitches. I lay stitches of about even down to 1 millimeter or so. Now, why do I do that? Because when you take it to that stitch length, and here you'll see my stitch length, I turn my stitch length to about 1 or 2 millimeters and click apply. All right? I will then put in my embroidery frame a piece of manila pattern paper, and I'll actually hoop it. All right? Once I've done that, I actually take the thread out of the needle, and I let that placement line run around that design. What it's doing is it's puncturing the pattern paper, but you're making an exact shape of your applique. Because the stitch length is set at a very small stitch length, my gosh, set it to 1 millimeter. Without the thread, it's not going to break any thread. You'll simply have to hold your little thread take-up lever or the thread break lever down so it will puncture the paper. But it's like it pops out of the paper itself. A very, very simple way to make an exact master of the applique that you have to cut. This is also the line when you're working with plotter software, with one of the aisle line cutters or this is the plotter line that you set. So it actually cuts the applique. So you can actually cut your appliques right from a plotter, saving the design and using it as a plotter file. Let's go back to the other design, the original creation, and let's go back into our properties box. So your tack down line, the offset now, and here's the control of it. Let's go ahead and zoom in. It's set at 25%. What that means, 0, 0, or 0 percentage on the placement line. It's right down the center of the applique. Now look, it's set to center, but to be quite honest, look, I guess I should have explained, I will vary this. On my placement line, we can come in and we can say like 75%, click apply, and I'm going to send it now, excuse me, I went the wrong direction. If I would have set it at, let's say 25, or excuse me, 50 minus 75, I believe that's what it would be. And click apply. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to send it 75. That was too much. But I can actually send my applique. Let me just jump back and get the right function in here. Get the right amount. Minus 40. What I'm doing by putting in the minus, I'm telling it to come from the outside of the line internally. Lots of people, when they do applique, they like the applique for your placement line to go deeper into the satin stitch border. There's not an issue with that. So again, my preference, I go 0, 0. But by using a minus, you're basically saying input 40% from the outside of that. A lot of people like that. They like more, let's say, more applique underneath the satin stitch. For me, it depends on the fabric style that I'm using, and if it frays a lot as I cut it out, or if it doesn't fray. If I'm working with vinyls and leathers, lots of times I will set it a little bit to the outside. But now, having said that, let's take that back to 0. I was actually talking about tack down offset. When you're working with the tack down offset, let me change this to 0. I'm sorry again, folks. When you're working with the tack down offset and it's set at 25, you can vary this. If I set it at 0, you'll see that it's going to put it right to the inner edge right here, okay? Excuse me, places it right on there. 50 is going to put it to the inside, even that much more. 50 takes it right along the edge. So you do have also control. So again, what I could do with something like this is I could come in and I could set this to 0, which would be down to the center. I can set this again to the minus 40. And what I've done now is I've driven my applique deeper, and then I've taken the tack down line through the center of the design, so the tack down line is centered more in there. So you do have a wonderful level of control. The pattern length that you have up here in the inset, pattern length is actually the size of your symbol. The inset, when we're talking inset here, you're saying that with an offset of 0, 50% of the applique is going to the outside of that, 50% of that is going to the inset of that. And again, your pattern length is simply your symbols. I got a few little tricks that I want to show you with the appliques. Before we move on and finish up with this tonight, Kath, let's go ahead and see if there's some more questions.
Yes, Walter. The extended versus the square corner. We've had a lot of questions on that, and I realize that the extended corner is a miter and only works if you have a fairly sharp angle. Could you show us that with the applique tool?
Yeah, if we come in and we make we'll just make a triangle, okay, and I'm going to go ahead and select this. Excuse me, and then I come into, I'm sorry, it's under here, and I come into my corner type, always have to select it. It's set at square. If I go extended, what it's trying to do there, and actually what it did here is actually very good. You know what? This is really quite amazing. Oh my God.
It miters beautifully.
Yes. Well, except this isn't really a mitered corner, Kath. What this is called, and we had talked about it. You know what? It's that darn DJ again, because I talked to him about getting some of the stuff done with this, and he's amazing because with very, very sharp corners with an embroidery design, here's a mitered corner, okay? Mitered corner angles in and angles out. But when you have very, very sharp corners, trying to miter like that puts so many stitches to the inside of the turn. Basically, to make this turn, you're coming up. I'll show you an example. If I grab a classic satin stitch, all right? If I grab a classic satin stitch, and I'll just pick another color, and I come into, where the heck you go, okay? I'll grab another color, and I come in and I try to miter this corner, okay? Okay, there's your mitered corner. But you see what I have right here? I have driven so many stitches to the inside here, and I've spread it out on this end. This is a total detriment to an embroidery design. This is basically telling you you're going to bird nest, going around corners, and this is a very hard corner. What's been instituted in the software, and I am so thrilled to see this in the software, is basically this is what we call a fake miter. It somewhat angles into the turn, and it somewhat angles out of the turn. It gives the illusion of almost a miter, but that's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. I'm so happy to see that that has been fully controlled. That just took applique on very, very sharp corners and just amplified our ability with appliques. A lot of times when the updates get released, I see all of those functions. Somebody did something here, and it was awesome, and I'm so glad to see this in here. This was one of the things that we were addressing, and it's done, and it looks like, I can tell you just by looking at it and watching how it runs. It is such a beautiful way to come around an extremely hard angle. And you see what we're doing here? We're fake mitering in, fake mitering out at a different angle. That is so soft and fabulous to the fabric that what you just saw there, folks, is absolutely amazing. I'm very, very pleased to see that. And again, you saw the difference in going into the square as far as the extended. It just squared it off and you lost your point. So again, the only way to do that unsquared is to go into the extended. You're now pulling absolute shape of the design. And that's amazing, absolutely amazing. So I'm so very pleased to see that in the design. That's what we want to see. That's incredible. Another question, Cass. I'm getting myself all excited now.
The other thing is you were talking about making a template out of tag board. I had a question on the Applique Wonder. What we can also do on that is you can take just your placement line, you know, turn off your other colors except your placement line, copy and paste it into a new design, and then you can actually print that template out on our Applique Wonder. That allows us to iron it to the back of our fabric and cut out the perfect shape, and it will have that sticky back to stick down.
That is such an incredible idea. And that Applique Wonder, again, as you go into Save to Sew with all your applique features, all right, let me say something, too, about Save to Sew when you're working with appliques. Many times when you're working with Save to Sew, you don't always want the additional underlay that Save to Sew will offer, especially when you're working with a design that is a stitch file. So as you pick your material type and when you're working with your underlay, go ahead and in most cases turn off your underlay setting because you don't always want those additional underlay put in there. Now, having said that, there are times when you will want to add additional underlay, and I'll show you that just a minute when we're done with this question or this part of the question area. If there's no more questions, Kath, I'll just go ahead.
Yeah, you go right ahead, Walter.
Okay, look, just a couple of tricks, folks. Currently, the tack down line done in Floriani software, you'll see, is done with a straight line of stitching, all right? But my preference many times is I like to use zigzag stitching when I'm doing my applique tack down because with a zigzag stitch, you're grabbing, because of the zigzag, well, look, I'll just bring something up and I'll show you. So let's come in here and just open the design. I'll go ahead and open up that Banana DST again. And I'm going to zoom in here, okay? Depending upon the fabric that you're utilizing for your applique, and you know what, I love adding fabric, so let's go ahead and go under, well, I have to do it in the original thing, but I could add my fabric type, but depending upon the fabric that you're using, all right, many times a straight stitch for a tack down line is not sufficient. Appliques can many times, like with fake fur and that, they can slip out from underneath this tack down line. So there are times when I do like to implant a zigzag stitch. And traditionally, two types of tack down lines. The straight tack down that you see within our software right here, but also a zigzag outline. But you know what you can do, folks? Once you have saved the design as a stitch file, when you bring it up, you'll now see in the sequence view, certainly that we have three colors. Well, you know what you do at this point, folks? When you see this on your design, or when you see this, just come on in and grab your satin stitch, okay? Let's zoom in here. Grab your satin stitch. Go into your underlay and activate a zigzag. And what it will do will be a double zigzag. Now, this is an amazing lockdown on almost any given fabric. The most difficult of fabrics will lock in place when you're using a double zigzag in the execution of it. Now, when you watch it slow redraw, because I was able to bring in the design as that stitch file, and it's now broken down into three different colors, when this runs, I get my, of course, my placement line, my initial tack down line, but now you know what I get? I get that blessed double zigzag in that third color. That will hold that applique absolutely in place. And no matter what fabric type that you utilize, that fabric is going to catch. It's just one of the little tricks that I really, really like to utilize when I'm doing appliques. We have and we are talking about inducing that zigzag tie down maybe into the program itself, but it's already there basically. Just bring it in, save it as a stitch file, bring it in, grab your satin stitch, put your double zigzag in there, and you're ready to go. So again,
I'm in awe, Walter.
Kathy, this software, the fact that you can take any structure, create it as an applique, create it as from vector-based files, from JPEGs, true type font. And look, one of the highlights, I mean, for me, I'll absolutely tell you, bringing in a true type font and converting it to an applique, and again, I will just bring in, I'm looking for my text file. I'm sorry, I didn't import my true type.
While you're looking, Walter, you're looking for that, that is this month's Project of the Month. They are turning a true type font into an applique in this month's Project of the Month.
Oh, that is so incredible, Kathy. That's so incredible. This feature right here, bringing it in, excuse me, let me select it. I've got to just size it up. Sizing it up, okay. But this ability to come in here and to right-click, convert that to an applique, and then this function right here, adjust holes. I can't tell you what that has done. And that can be done with any applique structure, but with true type text, that's unheard of. And again, if you're not sure what that adjust hole does, the issue with this, again, in a slow redraw, is that I've got placement, excuse me, let's run it over again. I've got my placement, then tack down, but the tack down's in the wrong blessed position in a design like that. My gosh, to go in and fix something like that in traditional and in most other software, you've got quite a bit of editing that you've got to do. No, you just simply select that, say adjuster holes, and boom, it's fixed that quickly. It's unheard of in embroidery software at that level of control. Again, my thanks to everyone who's worked on this portion of the program. It's been input from so many of you educators. I just can't tell you what you all mean to me and what your input means to me. So with that being said, folks, we can open up to a few more questions. Otherwise, that's Applique the Floriani way. Hugs and stitches to you all. I look forward to our next webinar.
Great. Well, we want to thank everybody for coming to the webinar. We hope you learned a whole bunch with our Applique. Look for this month's Project of the Month, which will be an Applique project. And I wish I'd known a couple of these tips when I wrote it. Thank you so much, Walter.
Thank you, Kathy. As always, Miss Quinn, you're the best. Thank you all.